everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to get more into relationships and talk about some signs that your relationship may not make it through this particular struggle and some signs that it may make it through. So a lot of these are surprising to people. We tend to think, oh, well, if this happens or if this is there, then we're gonna make it or we're not gonna make it, but the research kind of shows some things that may be surprising to you. So I'm going to get into those. I have about 5 things that that if those are there, it's probably going to either take longer or your relationship may not make it. And then I'm going to talk about a few things as well that even if those are there, in my experience, a lot of people still do make it through. So I'm going to get into all of that. So stay tuned. Comment with any comments or questions or reach out to me on my website if you want to connect with me for help or support or a question or whatever. All right. Okay, so let's get into some of the signs. Let's start first with some of the things that are bad and do make the road to recovery and healing a lot longer, but they don't necessarily mean that you're not going to make it. So these are kind of my in-between things, I guess, that I see a lot, and when they're present, we usually have more work to do and it takes longer, and each partner really needs their own work and their work together, but it doesn't necessarily mean that this is a red flag that we may not make it, even though a lot of people think that these are things that mean that they may not make it. So the first one is like the intensity of the problem or the habit, or how bad it is or how big it is. That obviously makes it a lot harder and a lot more intense, especially if you as the other partner didn't know that this was going on at all, or you thought it was okay and it's not. That's obviously going to make healing and recovery way longer and way harder. But it doesn't mean that there's a correlation between, oh, if it's in this intense or this bad, or they actually have cheated or they've been doing this for this long, that we're not going to make it. There's not really a correlation between intensity and not making it. Again, it's harder and it's more difficult to work through, and it takes more time and effort on both parts and on coming back together, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to make it if the problem is really, really intense, right? The other thing that I've been seeing a lot is that one partner said in the beginning of the relationship, hey, if this is a problem for you, I need to know because it's a problem for me, right? And I've heard this so many times. Usually it's the woman that says, hey, if you have a problem with porn or you watch a lot of porn, I have an issue with that and I want to know like where you're at with that. And I've seen it go where the man typically, again, this doesn't always play out like this. This is just what I see a lot of. The man says, oh no, I don't have a problem with porn at all. I don't even like it. Or they say something like, oh yeah, I watch sometimes, but it's not a problem. Or they say, actually, I did have a problem with that and I struggled for a while, but I'm doing really well now and it's not an issue for me anymore. And then they kind of close the book and move on, right? And the woman, again, typically thinks like, okay, we're okay, this is fine. Only to find out 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever, however many years later, that this is in fact a problem and it's a serious problem and it's something they've been hiding from them for a long time. Now the betrayal and the trauma of that is intense and it is big, right? And if you've seen my other videos, I go into more of this too, the betrayal trauma videos and some of like how you find out, what they're doing, if they confess or if you find out otherwise. These things impact this a lot because they impact the level of your trauma with this. And that obviously is going to impact how long it takes to heal on both sides. So the person that's doing all of this has to get their own work and get their help. The person that's been hurt by it has to get their help and work through their trauma with it, and then you have to come back together. And that, again, is a very long and intense process sometimes, but it can be done, and these things don't mean that, okay, we can't do this, like it's not going to work. It's not really linked that way either, although it does make it harder and maybe more intense and possibly more likely that it's going to be harder to work through or you won't work through it if the trauma and the betrayal is that deep, right? And it's not the level of the trauma also isn't about the intensity of the addiction. It's more about the betrayal, right? So if I thought that my partner wasn't watching porn and that was a big deal for me, and I find out that 10 years later they have been this whole time and they've been keeping it a secret, and it's been impacting, when I look back, I can see, oh, it's impacted everything. It's impacted the way they've treated me. It's impacted our intimacy and our sex life. It's impacted everything, and I was blind to it. That is a terrible feeling, and it is traumatic, and it really does, as I've used the metaphor before, it burns down the whole house. And you think this house is great, and you know, you have your struggles, but you're working through it and everything's okay. That kind of trauma burns the whole house down. So it feels like you have to rebuild, right, the house from the foundation up. So that takes time and effort on both parts to get through that. But it is possible. And I do see it happen a lot, that people can work through it and come back together. Now, there are things that when I see them, they tend to make it more likely that maybe we won't work through it as well, or it may take a lot longer, or we may not make it. There are like, what, 5 things that I listed that this is my opinion, right? That I see a lot. And when I see these things, if they don't change and mend over time and they just stay that way, it's likely that the relationship won't work. So these things are that the negatives in the relationship have been outweighing the positives for a long time. So the problem is beyond this, right? It's spilled into every part of our life. And really, I'm not getting as much from the relationship as I used to. Things are just more broken, and it's more negative overall, right? And with working through all of this, we can fix that and heal that and come back together. But if we don't, and we're not able to do that, and all the pieces are just so negative and so broken, sometimes it's really hard to come back together from that, obviously, right? Another big one I see is the level of communication that you have. Now, obviously, these are all present to a degree with this because of the nature of the problem and the struggle, and that you guys are probably looking at therapy or coming into therapy or needing therapy. So all of these things are here, but it's the degree to which they start to heal and you're open to working on them or not that is the main factor. So how are you communicating? How well are you able to communicate? And how much are you willing and working on communication? Now this is a problem because this has probably been a secret for a long time, and it's impacted a lot of things, and maybe you've kind of closed off from each other, or you've kept a lot more secrets, so you've closed some doors. You're not as comfortable being vulnerable. You don't feel as safe. You don't feel as trusting with them, even if you don't know the level of the problem. If you're not able to communicate through all of this, you're not really going to get anywhere. And that can be bad at first and get better over time, right? I've talked to couples that weren't even in the same house, and we just called in for a group video or a group phone call, right? But over time, they were able to communicate more and understand each other more and come back together. But if we're not ever able to do that, then obviously we're not going to get anywhere if we're not able to work on that open communication, right? And I often work, again, typically with the man, but that could be either way. If that is that broken, the man or the person that's kind of doing the harm there is going to have to do a lot of their own work and do a lot of their stuff, and the other person is also going to have to heal before they're able to come back together to a degree, right? If you've been really hurt and the house is burned down, you're not just going to want to jump back in and be vulnerable. It's going to take some time to get there and be able to do that, right? Let's see. So the other one is how well you make up from issues and fights or not, right? This is one of the John Gottman's signs that you may not make it, right? If you cannot come together after a conflict, how long does it take you to come back together after a conflict? Are you able to reconnect with each other? Is that difficult? Do both of you kind of shut off, or do you lean in? So if you're able to make up after conflicts, even a little bit or even to a small degree, this makes a big difference in if you'll make it or not. if you can't do that and you stay mad and you don't resolve issues and you don't talk about them and that keeps happening over and over again, that's a big sign that the relationship isn't going to make it. If you are able to come together and wave white flags after a conflict, or make the other person laugh, or lean in, or be vulnerable, do anything to come back together, that is a big factor in being able to make it and being able to work through things, even if what you're going through is really intense. I could do a whole video on that. Maybe I will, but that's a whole big piece. But that's kind of just a little bit of it. The other one is your values aren't in the same place anymore. And I see this with couples a lot, where we came together and we fell in love and we built this relationship, but over time we've come apart to a degree that we're not sure we can come back together. And that's because our core values and what we feel and what we want are just really different. And a lot of times couples are different and they still can work that out, but the core values need to be the same. And that sometimes gets really lost and skewed with a lot of this, and it just gets too far apart and it's hard to bring it back together, right? The last one is that you're both not committed to seeing this through the low and putting the effort in. And sometimes I see it that we kind of change, like one partner's really trying. Often if they were just caught or found out, then that person puts in a ton of effort and they're really in it, and the other person's like, can't do this, I need to step away for a while, or I need some space, or I need to see that you're really going to change. And then over time it kind of goes like this, and this person's like, okay, well, I'm going to come back in, I'm ready to try, I'm still really upset and hurt, but I'm ready to try. And then sometimes this kind of tapers off a bit and they're maybe not putting in as much effort, and then this person gets hurt and they're not putting in effort. So it can kind of go like this, right? Back and forth. And that's okay. There's a big portion of that that's natural, the up and down of that. But we both have to be committed to seeing it through and working on it. And that doesn't mean every week I'm ready to show up and work through this or even talk through it. But it does mean that, okay, I'm committed to trying to make this work. And maybe the partner that's been hurt says, okay, I need space for a while and I'll let you know when I'm ready to talk about it. And it's really healthy for them to do that. You want to set boundaries if that's the position you're in. You want to take care of yourself and you want to go into this as you're ready. And it's going to hurt regardless, right? But you want to still go into it kind of as you're ready. But if we're both not committed to working on it, or one person's like, you know, that you need to take care of this and I'm not willing to go to couples counseling with you or work with you on it, and that never changes, it's probably not going to work. It may feel better for a little while, but it's going to tank again, because we have to come back together and learn how to be a couple and trust each other and work through this together. So really, and I say this so many times, if this has really damaged the relationship and there is betrayal trauma there, both people have to get their own work and do their own stuff and take care of it separately. And that looks different for each of them. One has to really get this issue under control, really work on changing their habits and changing everything, right? Changing all the stuff that they're doing and working on their urges and their triggers and their brain patterns and everything, right? That has to be done. And that looks different than this. This has to be worked through. You have to grieve. You have to work on your stuff, how you've been impacted, your self-esteem, everything. And then we can come back together and say, okay, how do we try to understand each other more? How do we create a safe space where we can talk about this? How do we create a safe space to be vulnerable? How do we start rebuilding intimacy? What are some small ways that I can meet you and help you feel loved and wanted and cared about? So we have to come back together and work on that, right? So it's all three pieces have to be there for there to be success. So I know that was all over the place. So this has been on my mind as I've been working with couples over time, right? And I'm seeing these kind of patterns emerge in the couples that I work with. So I really wanted to kind of cover a lot of these little bases here for you guys. So if you have any follow-up questions or you want more on any of these topics, comment below. You can reach out to me and ask a question. You can also reach out to me for support or to set up a call or anything. So let me know if I can help you guys, and I hope that helped and kind of gave you some more clarity on some of this. All right. Bye guys. Have a good day.